Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to share my microcopy and UX writing process. Microcopy refers to the words that appear on a user interface that helps the users understand how to use the product. For example, let's consider twitter.com. On Twitter's user interface, you can see words like home and moments, notifications, messages. Each of these words has been selected very carefully to make sure that the user knows how to use Twitter. For example, consider the word home on Twitter's user interface. Now, when the UX writers for Twitter were working on the microcopy for the user interface, they must have considered different choices. Another word they could have used is feed, because technically that's what this is. This is the feed of the tweets that the people you follow on Twitter have posted. But instead of feed, they use the word home because that is the word that is more familiar to the users. Home is the more commonly used term across different websites, so that's what they went with. And they chose a word that the users would know how to interpret. Also consider the words notifications and messages. Technically, they could mean the same thing because a notification is basically a message from the system, whereas messages refers to the messages that actual real people send you. So that's how they distinguish between notifications, which is a message from the system, and messages, which is messages from real people. So all these words have been chosen very carefully and consciously by a team of writers who are called UX writers. And the process of UX writing is significantly different from tech writing. And the first time I realized that was back in March when I was assigned to a new project at Cockroach Labs that involved UX writing. So if you follow my channel, you know that I'm a tech writer. And being a tech writer, I thought I could easily come up with the microcopy for the new user interface. And I was so wrong. Turns out that UX writing requires a significantly different skill set than tech writing. So when I started writing microcopy for the project, I did a lot of research and came up with a process that would help me write microcopy more efficiently. So the way the UX design and microcopy process works at Cockroach Labs is that the design team first designs the user interface and then they send me a message asking me for the microcopy for the user interface. Now when I get that message, it is very tempting to get right into the words, that is, figure out which words we should use and how to phrase them, but I realized that's not the most efficient way to write the microcopy. What I need to do is step back and look at the big picture, look at the user experience, think through what the user is trying to accomplish in that moment, think about what emotions the user is feeling at that moment. For example, if you are introducing a new feature, the user is probably curious to try out the new feature, or they're excited about it, or they are skeptical about it. So I need to think through about what's the user's state of mind at that point and then choose the words that match that emotion and the task they are trying to accomplish. Whereas if it's an error message, then the user is probably in a frustrated frame of mind and they do not want a chatty, enthusiastic microcopy. What they want is professional help to solve their problem and move on with their task. And all of this thinking through becomes a mental burden if you're not used to it. So I started looking for tools that would help me think through the user experience for each screen of the user interface. That's when I came across this excellent microcopy canvas by Jane Ruffino. The canvas helps me think through every aspect of the microcopy for every screen. For example, who's the target user, what's the purpose of the copy, what are the user's concerns and emotions at that moment, what is the user context, do I have their full attention, or do I need to highlight some things to get their attention? What is the action that I expect the users to take based on the microcopy? What should be my style and tone of the words that I choose? What is the success criteria? And my favorite part of the canvas was the copy experiments. So since I was new to the UX writing process, I used to come up with like one version of the copy and be done with it. But having this prompt to think through the copy experiments made me want to come up with different versions of the microcopy and then choose the one that best met my requirements. So that is step one of my UX writing process, is step back, fill out the canvas and think through the user experience for each screen. Once I figure out the big picture, then I can start focusing on the individual words on the screen. Now this can also be a pretty daunting process. So I started looking for resources that would help me focus and choose the right words. That's when I came across this amazing video by UX writers at Google who talk about their UX writing process. I highly recommend that you watch the video. I'll leave the link in the description box below. Let me share my favorite takeaways from the video. The first one is pay attention to the verb. Rephrase the action so that it is from the user's point of view and not from the system's point of view, which means replace the technical jargon with words that the user is familiar with. For example, consider an error message which says something like failure, an authentication error has occurred. This is from the system's point of view. The user does not really know what to do about it. So to make it more clear to the user, you can rephrase the error message as sign in error, you have entered an incorrect password. So in this case, the user knows what the error is, where they went wrong, and more importantly, how to correct it and move forward. It's more actionable guidance for the user. Another of my favorite points from the video is that make sure every word on the UI has a distinct job. If not, get rid of it. Keep the most important information or the keywords at the beginning of the sentence and then ruthlessly edit everything that comes after it. This is a tip that I have found incredibly useful while writing concise and clear microcopy. And my favorite tip from the video is that concise does not mean short, it means economical. I think that's a common trap that UX writers fall into, is that when you are told to write microcopy for a UI, you want to keep it as short as possible. But that's not always effective and that's not always in the user's best interest. Instead, provide all the information that the user would need to make informed decisions and understand the consequences of the task that they perform. So to recap, my 3 favorite tips for writing microcopy are: first, make sure the microcopy is clear to the user, which means replace the technical jargon with words that are familiar to the user, and rephrase the actions so that it is from the user's point of view and not from the system's or the developer's point of view. My second favorite tip is to make sure that every word on the screen serves a distinct function. And my third favorite tip is that concise does not mean short, it means economical. Use as many words as you need to help the users make informed decisions and explain to them the things they can and cannot do on the user interface, and also the consequences of making those decisions. I know this is a lot of information, and I think it will be easier to understand if we go through some examples, which is exactly what we will do in the next video. So if you think it would be helpful to understand all these concepts by using an example of a real technical product, subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon so you will be notified when the video is up next week. I'll see you then. Until then, happy writing.